The horror genre is so wildly oversaturated that it's simply impossible for every potential rich movie to deliver on its promise. But it nevertheless really stings when a truly great concept gets squandered on an atrocious end result. And that's sadly the case with each of these films, where it's easy to appreciate why they got the executive green light given the imagination and intrigue of their logline. However, when it came to writing a compelling script, stocking the cast with talented actors, and actually shooting the thing worth a damn, they all fell down hard. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie with What Culture here with 10 terrible horror movies with amazing concepts. Number 10, The Bye-Bye Man. If you can forgive The Bye-Bye Man's laughably infantile title, it's actually got a pretty damn neat premise at its core. The titular supernatural antagonist gains power from the mere act of people either knowing or saying his name, in turn allowing his influence to spread. With better execution, this could have basically become a new generation's version of A Nightmare on Elm Street. But instead, audiences are forced to suffer through a script rife with unintentional comedy, including the now infamous one-liner, "What do you think I am, a flashlight?" As for the Bye-Bye Man himself, he looks more silly than scary, in turn wasting the brilliant Doug Jones in the role, and his CGI dog thing companion doesn't really help much either. Throw in how egregiously the film offers nothing to the likes of Carrie-Anne Moss and Faye Dunaway, and you're left with a flavourless stew of a horror flick which squandered its considerable potential within the first few minutes and never recovered. Number 9, Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. Given that the Friday the 13th franchise managed to deliver a fun Jason in space movie in Jason X, plonking the big guy in the middle of Manhattan should have been a walk in the park. Yet Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan fritters the potential riddled premise of finally moving far away from Camp Crystal Lake and having Jason Voorhees slice his way through the Big Apple by actually setting most of the movie somewhere else entirely. The film's $5.5 million budget didn't allow for extensive location shooting in New York, and so the overwhelming majority of Jason Takes Manhattan is set on a boat heading to the borough. Only a scattered few minutes near the end of the movie are demonstrably set in New York, and aside from neat moments like Jason turning up in Times Square and stalking through a subway car full of utterly unbothered New Yorkers, the film does nothing fun or interesting with the idea. Hell, the climax takes place not on or around a famous NYC landmark, but a random sewer. Great. If Paramount hadn't been so damn cheap with the budget, despite this admittedly being the most expensive Friday film at that point, it might have actually lived up to its glorious title. Number 8, Winchester. Winchester promisingly managed to secure the services of the great Helen Mirren to portray Sarah Winchester, the widow of legendary gun manufacturer William Wirt Winchester, who finds herself haunted by the victims of her husband's wares. The movie's based on true events hook is that Winchester ended up building an architecturally bizarre house in San Jose, California, in an attempt to trap said ghosts, and the absolutely striking nature of the setting was nothing if not a ripe one for a spooky horror flick. Yet from the exposition-riddled script to the avalanche of mouldy jump scares and excessively self-serious tone, Winchester makes bafflingly generic slop out of a killer idea. Mirren, bless her, has screen presence to spare but horribly mangles an American accent, in turn netting her a Razzie nomination for Worst Actress, while co-stars Jason Clarke and Sarah Snook are given desperately little to do. Winchester's worst crime, though, is just so damn boring. With a sharper script and more attuned direction, this could have been a damn classic. Number 7, Chernobyl Diaries. The found footage genre was already feeling plenty tired in 2012, but Chernobyl Diaries at least had a unique atmospheric setting, with its focus on a group of extreme tourists who visit the abandoned city of Pripyat near the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, only to find themselves assailed by the monsters residing there. With parts of the film actually shot on location in Pripyat, the filmmakers deserve a measure of credit for getting the superficial stuff right. But most everything else, a bust. Beyond the metronomically predictable jump scares, the abundance of shaky cam borders on nauseating. None of the characters are interesting, and the script is jam-packed with clunky, leaden dialogue. The mere $1 million budget also places a considerable ceiling on the project's effectiveness, given that the marquee CGI moments look quite horrible. It's incredibly easy to appreciate the potential of a horror film set in the shadow of Chernobyl, but this lazy effort comes off more as a cheap cash-in, and cash-in it certainly did, as it ended up grossing a cool $37.2 million at the box office. Number 6, The Last Voyage of the Demeter. An adaptation of a single chapter from Bram Stoker's Dracula, in which the crew of the titular merchant ship find themselves stalked by Dracula mid-voyage to London. This is a damn terrific idea for a movie, and one which has a lot going for it on paper. Between a skilled filmmaker and a strong ensemble cast, this had the potential to be a terrifying, efficient chamber piece instead of, well, an opportunity to catch up on some sleep. To call this low energy is to grossly understate the last voyage of the Demeter's issues, for despite all the above and a genuinely solid Dracula design, it takes far too long to get going and vastly outstays its welcome with a brutal 2-hour runtime. Additionally, the film was a colossal box office flop, because why the hell would anyone release a Dracula movie without his damn name in the title? Madness, I tell you! Number 5. The Dead Don't Die. Are we all ready to admit yet that the great Jim Jarmusch's 2019 meta-horror comedy The Dead Don't Die is just a bit crap? A giddily self-aware zombie comedy directed by one of the most accomplished indie filmmakers of all time, and boasting a mega ensemble cast. How could this fail? And yet, despite Jarmusch's general consistency as an artist, his screenwriting work here is dishearteningly lazy. The film's close to witless meta-gags feeling like a half-assessed crutch to support an otherwise generic zombie movie framework. The cast aren't given much worthwhile to work with here, ensuring that the instruction to play the material as deadpan as possible results in a film that feels somnambulant at best or unalive at worst. Most filmmakers have at least one clanger project among their work, and for Jarmusch this is unequivocally it, despite how perfectly suited he seemed for the idea in theory. Number 4. Abattoir. 2018's Abattoir boasts nothing if not a neat premise, in which a reporter investigates a man who buys homes where murders have taken place and reconstructs the crime scenes in a gigantic abattoir as he builds a huge haunted house for his own nefarious ends. The logline alone suggests a killer homage to classic B-movies of yore with a striking contemporary twist. Yet despite an intriguing setup and fun performances from the likes of Dayton Callie and genre royalty Lin Shaye, Abattoir is a staggeringly airless, dull rendition of a fantastic idea. Outside of the heightened concept, this feels depressingly generic and ordinary for the most part, less a unique entry into the genre than a deathly pedestrian, even procedural one. The particulars of its plot and character work weighed down what could have been a lean riff on cult faves such as House on Haunted Hill and 13 Ghosts. Number 3. Ghosts of Mars. Though John Carpenter's career was already firmly on the downslope by 2001, Ghosts of Mars at least seemed like a fun match for his pulpy filmmaking sensibilities. A sci-fi horror romp set in 2176 in which a group of Martian cops find themselves battling a colony of people possessed by ghosts. Sounds neat as hell! Throw in an amusingly eclectic cast and you've got a gamey, knowingly trashy stew cooking, right? Except even the most passionate Carpenter diehards will struggle to admit that this is anything less than a crushing letdown from the master filmmaker. Carpenter's on pure autopilot mode here as both director and co-writer, and though he claims he intended to make a campy action horror flick in the vein of Predator, he fell far short of the mark. Granted, a $28 million budget wasn't nearly enough to make this high concept work, but even so, it's seriously undercooked stuff. Number 2. Truth or Dare. Blumhouse's Truth or Dare might be the all-timer example of an army of screenwriters cooking up an awesome premise for a horror flick and then totally bungling it when it came to, writing an actually engaging script. The movie's concept is simple. A group of college students get inadvertently ensnared in a deadly game of truth or dare, where refusing to do what the game asks results in a player's violent demise. It's an immediately attention-grabbing idea for a campy R-rated comedy horror flick packed with gore in the vein of Final Destination. But this is not. Ultimately, Truth or Dare completely bungles all that promise amid a gobsmackingly awful script, packed with wooden dialogue and a near-total lack of internal logic. Worst of all though, it's rated PG-13, meaning the aggressively weak death scenes are very obviously chopped up to within an inch of their life in order to satiate the MPAA. There's depressingly little here to enjoy beyond the unintentionally cackle-worthy moments and a riotously dumb sequel-baiting ending, which, despite the film's enormous box office success, oddly never led to a follow-up. I wonder why. Number 1. The Nun. A spin-off centered around the breakout character from The Conjuring 2 certainly seemed like a great idea, but without James Wan in the director's chair, The Nun turned out to be an almost impressively boring rendition of it. Despite an atmosphere-rich Romanian setting and solid central performances, this is a real snoozer of a horror flick that, even at a mere 96 minutes in length, feels like a pure slog. Loaded with predictable jump scares but almost nothing that passes for genuine terror, The Nun is seriously yawn-inducing stuff that's basically forgotten the moment the end credits roll. It did, however, make an absolute mint at the box office, $366 million to be precise, ensuring that an ever so slightly improved sequel was released last year. Again though, with such a striking headline antagonist, both films should have been so much better.